Good evening. Thank you for joining us for tonight's Dixie Fire incident update. My name is Antonio Negretti. I'm one of the public information officers for the Dixie Fire. This evening, you will be hearing from various experts in their field, updating you on recent evacuations, fire activity, and weather. If you have any questions for our speakers this evening, please submit them in the comments section below. First, let me bring you the latest numbers regarding the Dixie Fire. The Dixie Fire is currently at 847,308 acres with 52% containment. There are currently 3,997 personnel assigned to the incident. I'd now like to introduce you to our first speaker. Please welcome the incident meteorologist, Derek Williams.
Good evening. Southwest winds continue today. The last couple of days we've had pretty gusty southwest and west winds, resulting in red flag warning conditions both Monday and Tuesday. However, the winds have subsided today just a little bit. They're still elevated, which creates elevated fire weather conditions. Typically, the stronger the winds tends to promote larger fire growth and fire progression. But we do have some good news in the wind department. It will subside the next couple of days. We'll still see some southwest winds tomorrow, but they will not be as strong as today. In fact, Friday we'll see quite light winds, mainly terrain-driven winds less than 10 miles an hour. So we do see some improvement in those winds coming up in the next few days. Dry conditions continue. Relative humidity remains very low during the day with single-digit relative humidity values, and even low humidity at night, which tends to keep the fire active. It will remain dry with the dry air mass overhead, and as those winds diminish, we'll start to see a high pressure build over the region. Not only will that keep the winds down, but also it will raise temperatures. So we'll become above normal for temperatures coming up probably the end of the week into the weekend, with 80s and 90s returning to the area. So it will remain dry through the weekend, but we also see a chance of rain starting on Tuesday. Very low chance, very low confidence, but it's kind of a signal of a weather pattern change with kind of a trough coming into the west coast and may provide us with some rain. So with that, thank you.
Okay, thank you. That was our incident meteorologist, Derek Williams. The next speaker we have for you tonight is our fire behavior analyst, Chief Don Watt.
Good evening. So you heard from the weather that we are starting to see a little bit of change. The wind did have an effect today on the fire, and the other big issue we still have is the dry vegetation. We've had very dry vegetation due to the drought that we've seen this year. So it is still burning on the interior of the fire in multiple places. So on the very northern portion of the fire, we saw a lot of those interior green islands, basically the unburned vegetation, started to burn actively today. We saw it yesterday also. So those are burning out. So that's also a good thing for us. As they burn out, it means that we will see less potential for long-range spotting over the course of the fire. That's also helping it so it burns to our control lines, and that's giving an advantage to the firefighters. So as we move down around, the big concern that we've been kind of watching today is down on that Highway 395 corridor. It is a very windy location, and it tends to stay windy longer than what we see on the northern part. So that fire is making a pretty good progression today. It's traveled several miles this afternoon, and it continues to burn actively. So that's what we are currently watching and keeping an eye on throughout tonight. There is some terrain that will enhance some of those winds overnight potentially. And we're going to keep a close eye and make sure that we can do the best we can to inform the operations on where the fire is going throughout the night. Thank you.
Thank you, Chief Watt. The next speaker we have for you tonight is the West Zone Operations Section Chief, Tony Brownell.
Good evening. I'm going to give you a quick little update on how the fire's doing. I'm going to go around the horn. So in branch 9, on this side of the fire, it's the west side of the fire, it's the Highway 32, 36, and 89 intersections. We're looking real good. The black on the map indicates that we're getting control of that section of line. We're doing what we call patrol and mop up. We're going there and putting out all the hot spots we can, going in and getting the deeper hot spots, so there's no chance of that fire getting back out. Moving up into branch 13, that's the stuff that's into the Lassen Volcanic National Park. It's in what we call an old burn scar. So they had a fire there several years ago, a lot of dead standing trees that create hazard for firefighters. So we're using a lot of caution going there and putting that line out, but we will go in there and either go right outside the park or going directly on that and put that out directly so it doesn't have a chance to go towards Old Station, that area up above it. Moving into branch 16 is kind of the northeast side of the fire. So that's where it's been giving us a little bit of a problem with this last wind event we had. In Division Romeo, Quebec, that's where the wind was pushing against it, trying to push it out. So we are having some spotting issues today, and this little section right here comes out, we call the haul road. It is spotting over the top. That means embers are flying out and going across our control lines and causing new fires. With our, what we call probability of ignition, it's almost 100%. So it means 100% of our light fuels, such as like pine needles and such, will get up in the air and will land outside the fire and start new fires. So we're getting lots of fires out there between that and Highway 44, but we're holding all that right now. The wind is subsiding a little bit. Moving down towards the Westwood area, it's holding very well, no movement on the fire. We're continuing to control and mop up that area as we discussed. Around Westwood, Almanor, and all that area in there, it's all contained in there. Nothing's coming out right now. We're getting what we call for services. So right now, a lot of the pine needles and the pine trees that got heated up, a lot of the pine needles are falling out and finding hot spots, which is causing little tiny fires. Not a huge threat to the public, but we are in there monitoring and keeping track of that. Moving into the Westwood sector around that area, same thing. We're trying to secure the line around Highway 36, all that area in there, so we get the road open back up around the structures, making it safe for folks to go back in. Down in the Janesville area, pretty active below it in this area down here in the east sector, but we mopped up around all the structures in there. We're containing that. We're making it nice and tight so we get repopulation in that back area as soon as we can. To repopulate, we got to make sure it's safe for the public to go back in. There's no stump holes. There's no trees that are going to fall on anybody. We got to make sure that there's no power lines issues. So it takes a little bit of time to go in there and do that, but we're working as fast as we can. Down in the east sector today, the fire made a run. So it came in alignment with the winds and the fuels and the topography and started making a run towards 395 on an escarpment. Where it shows it right here, it's actually a little bit farther. It's almost to the escarpment now. We moved a lot of engines around and personnel. We're down there on 395, concentrating on structure protection, so when it does come off that hill, we're going to be there to catch it, to keep it out of the structures as best we can. You get a further update from the East Zone shortly. Thank you.
Thank you, Chief Brownell, for that great information. As Chief Brownell said, we will now take you to the East Zone, where we have a video from Chief Billy Bryant, the Operations Chief for the East Zone.
Good afternoon. My name is Bill Bryant. Good afternoon. My name is Bill Bryant, Planning Ops for Great Basin Team 1. This is the afternoon briefing of September 1st, 2021. So I'll start over on the very western edge of the fire, and we'll kind of go clockwise around that fire, kind of give an overall update and what's going on today. So we'll start over in the Bucks Lake area. As most of you already know, most of this area is pretty well holding. There's black line all around here. What we're doing now is mopping up over there, retrieving all the hose, all the pumps, and there's many, many miles of that. No issues whatsoever as far as fire issues in that area. If we come back around, we're going to come into Taylorville and Genesee. Taylorville continues to have structure protection throughout the community of Taylorville. The fire has not made a push into Taylorville in the last 3 or 4 days. I'm not saying it is totally out of the woods, but we do have resources in there, mainly structure protection at this point in time, as well as Genesee. Genesee, a couple nights ago, we had a fairly significant push down into the town. It pushed right behind the houses, which probably was a good thing. Our engines were able and crews were able to catch that with very minimal, if any, loss in that area. So the fire is basically right around the structures. The crews are mopping up around there and making good progress. So we're pretty comfortable in that community right now. We'll go up on the upper end up here around Indian Valley, past Indian Valley. This area, as we come out of Almanor, we are working with our counterparts up in the west zone. This area right here that you have been seeing that is still uncontrolled or uncontained, this is a real boggy area. It's more like a peat moss and no threat to anything. The lake is really not a true lake. There's a grass component up here, but that is given just smoke issues, no threat to private property or structures, but we are taking action on this as needed. As we come around, everything looks good up all through this area, and this is all basically a mop-up, holding operation, and retrieving equipment that we have out on the line. This particular red line right here shows fire edge, and it burned into the Walker fire, and it's been holding there for at least 7 days, and there's no big movement in there. This is almost like a dirt landscape in here, and we're real comfortable with that currently in that area. We'll go back over into the Taylorville and this area right here. This is called the Punch Bowl area. And what's happening in here, this little fire piece right here, and it looks little, but it is rather large. The crews have constructed dozer line. This is all plumbed in here, what we call plumbed. That means hose lays, pump lays, along this dozer line, as well as down on these dozer lines. In the future, we're probably going to have to take some more aggressive action in here. We do not trust this dozer line by itself, so we'll have to do some tactical ignition in here. That will probably occur during the evening when the burning conditions are much more favorable than the daytime. We do not want that fire to come down this direction into the Quincy area or the Greenhorn area. This is our primary objective still, is to keep the fire out of the 70 corridor right here. That's where all of our main structures are located. And so we do need to accomplish this. This will probably be in the next 2 or 3 days. We'll come down Grizzly Ridge. As we come down Grizzly Ridge, at the present time, this is all holding, mopping up. Hopefully this can turn black in a couple days, or in other words, a contained line. The crews continue to work this entire Grizzly Ridge down into the Davis Lake area. We have crews about right to here right now. We did have a small slop over or a spot fire that got outside of our containment lines. The crews have went around that spot fire, and by the end of shift, we'll tie it into Davis Lake. So we think this is going to hold this evening. We're pretty comfortable. We have night crews in there this evening holding that. As we go around the upper the upper end of Davis Lake, this piece continues to spread slightly to the south. We have numerous aircraft. We have the scoopers, which come down into the lake, scoop the water out, and take that water and put it on the line. Helicopters are working in there. We do not have any that I'm aware of fixed ring retardant working in there at the present time. As we come out of the Davis Lake area, this fire is pushing a little bit south. We have about 40-mile-an-hour winds right there, right now, pushing the fire. And in the last hour or hour and a half, major wind pushed this fire up at the head. It has crossed over the 177. This is the 177 more or less road. It has a real narrow head because it is a wind-driven fire. Talking to the operations section chief that's actually out in the field, he said it was a large flaming front that was burning out there. Nothing could stop it. We do have fixed wing scoopers working that line, but mainly trying to just keep this in check so it does not come around on us out of the Clover Valley area. We do have structures within Clover Valley. We have structure protection in place in Clover Valley. So we should have no issues in there. This is more of a meadow type fuel component. So as we come up here, so this fire is basically spreading towards Black Mountain Comm Site and the Highway 395 corridor. We're not real comfortable in putting resources at the head of this, and so it's basically doing its thing for this operational period. We're working with the West Zone, coordinate the effort that what's going to be needed if in fact it does cross over the escarpment right here and impact the community of Milford and Highway 395. I'm not saying it's going to do that this evening, but if the winds continue like they are, it has a high probability probably of continuing to spread that direction unless we get some kind of fire behavior wind change component. Other than that, our priorities still are Quincy, Greenhorn, Kromberg, all down in the Portola area, this Lake Davis area community. We have structure protection throughout that entire corridor, and we're comfortable right with the fire edge right now and holding that, and that's still our main priority. That's the end of the briefing.
The Lassen National Forest, Deb Bumpus.
Good afternoon, everybody. Deb Bumpus, Forest Supervisor on the Lassen. Also want to let you all know that I've also spent some time in my career on the Beckworth Ranger District, so I'm very familiar right now with where that fire is going. And I know they're doing everything they can to get a handle on that, but if you are from that area, you also know the history of the fires in that area and the role that the escarpment plays. So just know that folks are doing the best they can out there, being very aggressive. And these are folks from all agencies. We are working hard together in this incident and sharing resources as much as we can. I wanted to just touch on a couple of things that I've seen in the chat over the last few days. One is just in mentioning some of the other communities that were really active in the very beginning of this fire, and that would be the Shingletown area, Mineral, Hat Creek. And so just know that those areas seem pretty comfortable, safe right now. There's a lot of firefighters on that side providing protection. You've got a wind that's going back to the east, and so it looks like you're in good shape. So you will continue to hear some good news from those areas, I feel. So a couple of other things that we have been doing. We've been spending time with our tribal partners in looking at their sites, the cultural sites, and also the tribal sites. Spent some time in meeting with them this week and also in the field and looking at ways that we can protect those areas for them. One of the other things that is a little bit different, and folks here in Susanville could have seen this last year. If you remember the sheep fire, after the sheep fire, we had black bears roaming the streets out in well away from the mountains. We had gray squirrels in town that I haven't seen here in town in a long time, and just a lot of movement of wildlife. And you think about all the habitat that they've lost. You will see a lot of those wildlife coming into town this winter looking for food, so be extremely careful. Try not to feed them scraps, table scraps. They'll find food. That's why they're out searching. But also know that they'll spend a lot of time on the roads. You know, they do get the salts off the roads in the wintertime, so be very careful. They'll start doing that here pretty soon. So just wanted to touch on a few of those things. Thank you for joining in again tonight, and I'll finish my comments there. Thank you.
Okay, moving on to our next speaker from the Lassen County Sheriff's Office, we have Sheriff Dean Groudon.
All right, good evening, everyone. I want to start off by some changes in warnings and orders. We did issue some orders today, primarily in the, well, they're in the South Janesville, Milford, Herlong area. So on the west side of Highway 395 from Raker Place, which is south of like Thunder Mountain Road. So again, on the west side of Highway 395 from Raker all the way down to Herlong Access Road A26. On the east side of Highway 395, all the way from Milford Grade to A26. And again, that's the east side or lake side of Highway 395. Those were all placed under evacuation orders. So deputies and other mutual aid officers were going door to door. We sent out alerts, working to get people out of that area. The additional areas are the area, all the residences accessed off of A25 and A26 up to, Sierra Army Depot, and the federal exclusive jurisdiction out there that houses the military base and the federal prison. So everything up to that is under a mandatory evacuation order also. And then we did do warnings in the northern part of Doyle. Really, that area has some protection from the Beckworth fire, but just out of a abundance of caution, we wanted to put that area into an order. On the positive side today, we were able to drop the warnings for the Westwood, Pinetown, Clear Creek area, and we dropped the orders along Highway 36 from Susanville all the way to the Lassen Plumas County line west of Westwood to a warning. For some of we've had some people calling into our dispatch center about, the plume visible from Westwood and that Caribou Wilderness area. Obviously, the fire is still active in that area. We'll see that plume, but it hasn't, the activity up there doesn't change, the status of Westwood, Pinetown, and Clear Creek. There is no warning for those areas currently. We are, the areas I mentioned earlier that are under mandatory evacuation orders, we take our responsibility to protect your property. When we ask you to leave, we take that responsibility very seriously. So the Sheriff's Office, our partners with CR, CHP, CAL FIRE, Prevention, Peace Officers, Forest Service Law Enforcement, and even our local probation will have people out there 24/7 watching your property. I just want to ask everybody to, please comply with evacuation orders. And when warnings are issued, please follow the instructions in those releases and be prepared to leave the area. Right now, particularly in the area where we issued all those new orders today, 395 really is the only route in or out of those areas. And if you don't comply or you delay in complying, your options, for evacuation routes could be very limited. So I recommend that people take advantage of the time they have now to get out of that area. Again, I want to thank all the firefighters here and all over the state working to protect our communities. Thank the public for their ongoing patience and support. God bless and be safe.
Thank you, Sheriff Groudon. For our next speaker, we're going to return to the East Zone, where via video we have for you the supervisor for the Plumas National Forest, Chris Carlton.
This fire continues to challenge and push us. It continues to threaten our. Good evening. I'm Chris Carlton, Forest Supervisor here on the Plumas National Forest, with a quick update coming to you from over here on the East Zone. This fire continues to challenge and push us. It continues to threaten our communities, and it continues to create impacts. We see that today, especially those of you in Lassen County looking at the communities of Milford down there, recognize that these remain tough times. And while the fire continues to threaten our communities, we're not going to let it threaten our sense of community. And I continue to see across all of the 800 and whatever thousand acres of this fire, people working together, as tired as we all are, standing together and continuing to do everything we can to support our firefighters and first responders in putting this fire out.
And for our last speaker for the evening from the West Zone, we have the Incident Commander for Cal Fire Incident Management Team 1, Chief Nick Truax.
All right, good evening, and thanks for joining us tonight. As a few of the speakers have already said, we're at 847,308 acres as of this evening. This is day 51 of the fire. So a lot of work has been done, a lot of work to continue to be done. We've had 3 incident management team state crew rotations and 4 federal IMTs on the East Zone. So a lot of personnel have been on this incident. They've went home for a little break and came back in a lot of cases. Currently, 3,997 firefighters on the ground, 342 fire engines, 59 crews, 138 dozers, and 19 helicopters are assigned. We're up to 3,875 personnel evacuated. That's up 1,351 for today with the activity down on Highway 395. Statewide, there are over a dozen large fires currently burning, over 15,000 personnel assigned to those fires, over 1,300 fire engines, 390 hand crews, 351 bulldozers, 368 water tenders, and 110 helicopters. So we are spread very thin in California. Folks are, the firefighters are out there. They're very tired. We're trying to get them rotated home for a few days and then back off to the other fire. We're still here. We will remain here with the communities. We keep getting shrunk down, the areas of where we're fighting fire, but there's still a few areas to take care of, and there's several weeks worth of work once we get this fire contained. So again, as other speakers have said, and we do it a lot, we like to thank the firefighters, the law enforcement, and everybody out working the lines. But one set of folks that I would like to acknowledge tonight, and most of you here in the Susanville area know that we recently had to move our incident base from the fairgrounds to a new site, and that's a heavy lift. We're supporting close to 2,500 people out of just this one camp, and there's a lot of stuff that goes along with that. So I really want to acknowledge the logistical folks that helped with that move, and that includes a lot of our private vendors, the folks that have the trailers, the tents, the sinks, that help with the kitchen, those kind of things. That was a heavy lift. They got this camp moved in basically overnight to where we ate dinner at one camp, and we ate breakfast at the next camp, and got this thing set up, and really didn't affect the actual operations on the ground. Some of us had to do a few different things for a day or two, but it didn't affect the ground operations. And I'd just like to thank all those folks, because that was a lot of work after being out for about 50 days. And thank you all. Have a good night.
Okay, thank you, Chief Truax. We actually have one additional speaker, a little change to our program. We're fortunate to have with us tonight the superintendent for the Lassen Volcanic National Park, the superintendent via Zoom, Jim Richardson.
Good evening. I'm Jim Richardson, superintendent of Lassen Volcanic National Park. At Lassen Park, we saw the Dixie Fire coming early and were able to make preparations a step ahead of just reactive fire operations. I have delegated fire operations to the Unified Incident Command Team, and we have been in close communications with both leadership and ground operations many times daily, with the goal of putting the fire out and stopping the spread. The way to control the fire spread is to locate and make whole natural and man-made barriers to the fire that can be defended. The park has suggested to the team multiple opportunities for these fire lines in the park, and are almost wholly the same lines that the fire team has also selected. I've agreed to every suggested tactic by the team, including dozer lines at 5 locations, masticator use. At one point we had 13 masticators working in the park, mechanical harvesters, chainsaw use in wilderness, retardant at strategic locations, hand lines for a direct attack, helo and fixed wing water drops, and strategic firing of lines. The fire has burned through over 60% of the park land area, and there have been losses of several structures. Although a few places have received high intensity fire, the majority so far are moderate or low intensity. Previous natural fires, prescribed fires, natural barriers, manual and mechanical removal of fuels have greatly moderated the fire behavior and given firefighters a chance for their tactics to be successful. In particular, multiple areas around facilities that receive fuel reduction treatments have been spared because of these treatments. While fuel treatment alone will not always result in structures not being burned, we've already seen this success at multiple locations. I want you to know that we stand with the communities that have endured losses and continue to focus on those communities that remain at risk. There's no estimate for when the park will reopen, but we can already see that many of your favorite places in the park will continue to look good when you're able to return and take a look for yourself. Thank you.
Thank you. Most of the questions tonight were answered during the presentation of our speakers. We'd now like to move to the period of answering a few of those outstanding questions and welcome back to the podium the Operations Section Chief, Chief Tony Brownell.
We received several questions on some areas that specific wanted answers on, so I'll cover most of them. So one of them was the Mill Creek Plateau, which is pretty close to Mineral. Right now the fire is not spreading at this point. We're continuing to mop up. It's looking very good in there. I'm pretty confident that area that's going to be done in there pretty soon. The Silver Lake area, which is right in here where this big black mark is, the fire has gone around the lake, and today it did jump to Silver Lake Road, but we were able to hold it with aircraft and crew, so we're making good progress around the Silver Lake area. The Herlong area in Janesville, which is over here. So the Janesville slop over, it's about a 3,000 acre slop over. It is very challenging because of the terrain, but we do have line all the way around it, and we're in the final stages of mop up around Janesville and all the little communities around there down to Milford. So the concern is when the fire is spreading out in the Division Papa down here on the right side that made the run today, that's going to get back into the Herlong area and into the Doyle area and into the Milford area. So as we know, Doyle's down here, Milford's here, Herlong's right across the river from it, or right across the road from it. The fire is going to make a run down there. It's done it year after year. It is a very challenging place to fight fire. Once that fire comes off that escarpment, that cool air gets pushed down to the valley as the hot air in the desert. It comes down with a fierce movement into it. It's very dangerous for firefighters, but we're making everything we can to save the structures in there. But we do not trade lives for property. But I guarantee you those firefighters will do everything they can tonight to save those structures when it does come down. The Warner Valley area, we got several questions on it. It sits right here above Chester in that Lake Almanor area. So the day the fire burned through the Warner Valley area, it jumped Highway 36 and it ran towards Chester, and it also made a push up 36 up over the Stover Mountain towards the Warner Valley. That day that fire made a 12-mile run past 36 up into the park, right below the park. That was a phenomenal. It was almost 100,000 acre spread that day. We tried to put resources into that area to save the structures because we know there's cabins that's been in the families forever. We knew there's a lot of property up there, but it was very unsafe for a while for us to get in there. One of the questions is why did it take 2 days for the air tankers or the aircraft to get in there? One, when the fire was moving so fast, there was so much smoke, the tankers and the copters could not get in there safely. You gotta remember, they're limited by visibility. They're flying low to the ground. Terrain's changing quite a bit in there because it's mountainous. If they go too low, they're going to meet a mountain, and we don't want to trade life for that. We tried to get them in there as soon as we could. It took a couple days, but once we finally got them in there, we did some work in there. But it was a very dangerous place to fight fire that day. And for everybody that lost property on this entire fire, believe me, after the 34 years I've been doing this, every structure burns down, I feel personal about it because we know that is your property, it's your life, it's everything you have in there, and we do everything we can to save those structures. The area of Grizzly Peak and King Salmon Mine. That's down here above Quincy, above or a little south of Taylorsville area, Genesee Valley. The fire is past that already. It's gone down Grizzly Ridge, and it followed the ridge down towards Lake Davis, so that area is all consumed by fire at this point. I hope that answers your question. Janesville, covered that a little bit more. It is not moving anywhere. Every structure in there that we could save has been saved. All we're doing right now is making sure it's safe for people to go back in there because there is some damaged power infrastructure. There's some stump holes and things like that, so we're making it safe. And it's the same thing with the rest of the fire. We cannot just, as soon as the fire goes through, we just can't let people back in because it has to be made safe for you to go back in. We don't want you guys to survive the fire to go back in and get hurt by a tree or a stump hole, which is burning in the ground, or any other kind of hazard. We have to make it safe before we allow it to come back in. It takes time. I wish you guys to be patient and let us get in there and get it done, because believe me, we want to get you back in there as soon as possible. Thank you.
Thank you, Chief. We'd also like to welcome back up to the podium Sheriff Dean Grodon.
All right, I got 3 questions here. So one of them is about Warner Valley, and that's in Plumas County. But I will tell, so the question was, when will Warner Valley open? And I just wanted to answer this broadly. So, Lassen, Plumas, Tehama, Shasta, all the counties impacted by this fire, we meet with operations and incident command staff each day and talk about all those areas. And we really, we seek that input from the team, and we're all working together on making those decisions when areas can be opened. And I just wanted to say that, that Warner Valley has been discussed multiple times and is constantly being evaluated by Plumas County Sheriff's Office as well as the team. And as soon as it's safe to repopulate or, reduce that area and let people back in, they'll do so. The other questions are related to traffic. First one is Highway 36. Will it open tomorrow? And what I've been told is that 36 will open at 7 a.m. tomorrow. Piloted traffic. The road construction is going to resume, and they will be piloting people through Highway 36 between Westwood and Susanville, just like they had been prior to that closure brought on by the fire. The next one is 395 open. So 395 is open currently. I just came from Milford, that Milford Herlong area. There is a lot of fire equipment, a lot of emergency personnel between law enforcement, fire, equipment, dozers, and equipment, just along the highway or traveling that highway. So really, right now, you shouldn't be traveling 395 unless you have to. And if you are traveling that route, whether day or night, you should be traveling with your headlights on. You should be reducing your speed. yielding to fire equipment, emergency vehicles, and so on. Everyone really has to be careful right now. There's a lot of activity going on, and we want to keep those highways open, but we also want to keep people safe. But CHP and Caltrans is staged in the area, and they are ready to close down 395 if it becomes necessary for public safety. But right now, I think the emphasis really needs to be on, don't travel that route unless you have to. And if you do, really take those extra precautions. Slow down, keep your headlights on, and yield for fire equipment and emergency vehicles. Thank you.
Thank you, Sheriff Groudon and Chief Brownell, for answering those outstanding questions. We'd like to thank all the presenters for their information. If you would like to find the evacuation maps for Plumas, Lassen, and Butte counties, you may find those listed on their respective websites. Incident updates will be provided at 7 a.m. and 7 p.m. We will continue to provide the Facebook and YouTube Dixie incident every other evening. Our next meeting will be Friday, September 3rd. Once again, Friday, September 3rd, we'll be back with you. The live stream may be found on CAL FIRE Lassen MODOC Facebook page and the Plumas National Facebook page, or the Lassen National Forest Facebook page. In the meantime, you may go to InciWeb and search under the Dixie incident for the latest information. You may also go to the CAL FIRE homepage at www.fire.ca.gov. Please continue to follow social media platforms for the Lassen National Forest, Plumas National Forest, and CAL FIRE LMU. Finally, at the end of this presentation, we will have for you on screen QR codes which will link you to our live presentations and email updates. We sincerely appreciate your time this evening. Thank you for joining us.